Nope. There we go.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
get it. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we are now live. Welcome to a conversation with, and I am your humble host, Floyd Marshall Jr. And today I am joined by the amazing Miranda Bowden Parker. Make
Yay!
hey. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Floyd Marshall Jr. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can see more amazing interviews like the one that you're about to listen to. Because, again, today I'm talking to Miranda Bowden Parker, author.
Hello.
And I mean, as far as screenwriting and books,
Yes.
producer,
Yes.
film director, fashionista, and just a phenomenal person to listen to if you're wondering about how to move properly in this business, especially as a woman of color. So,
Yeah.
Miranda Bowden Parker, welcome
Yeah.
to a conversation with. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
You know what? I'm making it. I'm making it. Despite our slight little scare there, but
Yeah.
that's okay. We are ready to go. And again, I am so happy that you're here because I enjoyed our conversation that we had on the Black in Hollywood panel
Yes.
with you, with the phenomenal Kenethia Parker, with Mr. Brandon Myrie. It was just an amazing talk. So I wanted to have you on the podcast because, I had some questions for you about your journey in this business. So
Hmm.
the first thing I want to ask is how did you get started in the film industry? It's an interesting story.
It's actually a very interesting story because I never wanted to be in this industry. I'm born and raised in LA, so you grow up and you're exposed to it your whole life, and it's just one of those places that has never really been my fancy. So a couple years ago, right after I wrote my book, I started a writers group here at my house, and a lot of people were coming and people were writing, and everything from podcasts to blogs were a big deal in 2014 to you know um, screenwriting. They were entering contests. That's when contests became like a thing, and they were everywhere. I'm sure they were around before, but not in not in my hemisphere, like
Mhm.
not anywhere that I was used to being. So as this kept going, we were talking about different ideas and things like that, and people were talking about Issa Rae's competition that was coming up with who was it? It was Issa Rae, and was it ABFF? And everybody was like, you should enter. And now I have quite a few friends in the business. And
Mhm.
I was like, well, I don't really know how to write like that. I'm not good at it. That's not, it's not my thing. But I looked up some stuff online. Google is our best friend. And I wrote a treatment. And that was the first part of the contest. You had to enter a treatment or a one pager,
Mhm.
and then I did it, and I got to the second round. And it was funny because then I let a lot of people who I do know read it, and they were like, oh, you did this all wrong. You're like, they're like, it's not supposed to be set up like that. You got to give them the ending, so people aren't left guessing. And I was like, oh, I thought it was like a story, like the front page of a novel,
Mhm.
I mean, of a book, the flap. You only give them so much so that they're, intrigued enough. And so I went from there, got to the second round of that one, got to the second round of Stay Macro. Never wrote a script before. So when it got to the script part, I'm learning the elements of it as I go. But when I was able to get that far, start meeting people, start having interviews and things like that, I decided, let me learn this the right way. And that's when I kind of deep dived into it. So it was like a happenstance. Let me try it. I'm always willing to take a risk. That's one thing you'll know about me from anything. I'm always like, well, what the worst that can happen is I don't do well.
Mhm.
So I'll just move on to something else.
Right. But see, I want to go back because you said something interesting. So you made it to the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your friends had read what you had written after you had made the second round.
Yes.
Now, here's the interesting thing about that. They all said you did it wrong,
Yes.
but you made it to the second round,
Yes.
which bears out this thing that I've heard a lot of people say that there aren't really any rules.
There aren't really any rules if
Mhm,
you have a good story. If
mhm,
you have a good story, if you have a good idea, if you know how to make it pop, they really overlook I will say the nuance of the way things are supposed to be done, right? So if
mhm.
you go on Twitter, writing Twitter, or even Instagram writing or Pinterest writing, everybody has the rules of, don't say we see, don't put camera direction in there, don't bold your slug lines. You have to be able to do this. You don't, give this person the description, blah, 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 blah. All of that is overlooked if they really think you have a good premise. And I guess at the time, this was before a lot of these missing shows are coming out. That
Mhm.
is the show that I was writing. And I have like an affinity for missing people. Like it's just been something that I've uh, been attracted to since I was a very young girl, my mom said. So that was what my show was about. And like I was doing what everybody says, write what you know. I wrote what I knew, and it got me there. And it got me a lot of what I do in the industry, a lot of what I've done in the industry.
Okay. So that basically bears out the fact that it doesn't have to be so much industry formatted, let's just say.
Hmm.
If you have a phenomenal story, because I guess the people looking at what you wrote, I guess their mindset was, okay, well, she did this wrong, she did that wrong, but this story is really good. This is something that we can go back and correct.
Yes, because it can sound like a pitch.
Mhm,
When you go in and you're meeting with different people in general meetings and that kind of thing, and they're like, okay, so what do you have? You have 30 seconds to give them a pitch. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, you got anything else? 30 seconds again to give them a pitch. As long as you're writing the way some people can hear the way this would translate if
mhm,
we were sitting in front of each other. Now, there are other people, and especially contests, which contests and fellowships get you very far in this business. There's always, there's like 7 million pathways into this business and journeys or whatever. So, however yours is yours, right? But if you go into contests and fellowships, they are a stickler for the rules. And
mhm.
so, and they train people how to be readers for that. So a lot of times, even if you do have a good story, you would have to find somebody who's compassionate enough or is wants that enough to go to bat for you if you did it wrong. So whoever, at ABFF and Stay Macro that read my stuff, I love you and I owe you an Amazon gift card.
Okay, so let's go back to age 8 because I've read somewhere that you wrote your first story about mushrooms invading the earth.
Yes.
And when I've read that, I'm a big science fiction fan. I've
Okay.
always been one. The Sprague de Camp, all of those types of, Michael Moorcock's of the world.
Yep.
And when I've read that, I said, oh, see, here's someone after my own heart. So at the age of 8, you write this story.
Yep.
Where did that concept rather come from at such a young age?
Honestly, um, I don't know. And I'm going to be honest with you.
Mhm,
I have been a reader since I was like 5.
mhm,
Um, like being introduced to reading was probably the greatest gift someone could have ever given me. And so the exposure to different ideas, the exposure to the way you can kind of talk about, let's say, sociopolitical things, um, I, I learned about very early. So I think that's where my brain is always like kind of circulating around, like what have I read before, or where, like when I talk to people about their developing their things,
Mhm.
I can pull from so many different sources that might not naturally be what somebody's genre is. And that's because I kind of dip and dive into everything. So what's funny is I am not a science fiction person.
Mm.
And everybody in my family, save for one, everybody in my family is.
Mm.
I've never been able to really understand it, get into it. There's so many layers and depth, and like you really have to understand it. But people taking over the world has always been my thing.
Mm.
And I'm a firm believer in aliens. So,
Okay.
judge
Okay.
me if they want, but I don't believe that God just decided, okay, here's one mold and we're just going to leave you guys there. I believe
That
that there's all kinds.
that is such a small-minded way of thinking, that is
Yes.
as large as the universe is, that we're the only inhabitants of it. And I'm an avid reader myself, and the one thing
Yes.
that I love about books, and this is what I used to always tell people, because sometimes I would be in the house when it was really nice outside, and I would be
Hmm.
reading, and the one thing I would say to people is a book takes you places you otherwise would never go.
1,000%. 1,000%. My dad and my mom encouraged it. If you go in my back room,
Mhm.
in my office, there's 1,000 books. When we renovated my house, my husband was like, "You got to throw away a lot." And I'm like, "Throw away my foot. I'm going to find a library, a kid that wants it, all of that." I have my original set of Nancy Drew's.
Mm.
Mystery has always been like a thing for me. But it's funny that you say where reading can take you, right? So, like I was saying, I'm not a big science fiction person, but this year being exposed to it a lot more has been such an interesting deep dive. So when we were talking about the aliens thing, right? And I'm like, oh, we can't just be the only people. And then I started reading Three Body Problem, and I watched it. And in there, one of the aliens says, he's like, oh, so they look like us on other planets. And she's like, no, we did this to make you comfortable. And I was
Mm.
like, that's exactly how I feel. Why do
Mhm.
they always have to look like that? And I'm like, who came up with this idea of what the alien? And so I think that's where we always, it takes our imagination into different places, because it's like, well, what do they really look like in
Mhm.
that? And you start writing a story from that perspective. I had this long development conversation yesterday with my brother-in-law, because he's a writer too. And the dips and dives that we went into all came from the fact that we both expose ourselves to like so many different genres.
Yeah, because with that, you there is no ceiling and there is no bottom.
Yep.
You could write anything. Like right now, I remember reading a book. Now we are totally off topic, but that's okay because
That's okay.
I remember reading this book about from Isaac Asimov,
Oh,
and
yes.
these two people were playing chess,
Mm.
and they're moving the knights, they're moving the pawns, and they're moving them around. But one of the people noticed that, because it was an electronic board, but one of the people noticed that the pieces were acting strangely. Go down to the chessboard, and the knights and the pawns actually facing off from each other, they were actually sentient beings. So
See?
every time someone would move a piece, it would
Yep.
become animated, and then they would be put into action. So if the knight had to go against the king, the knight would then try to attack and kill the king. And
Yep.
the other players on the other side of the chessboard would try to defend. So I'm
See?
reading that, and so now if you come back out to real life, to us it's just a chessboard,
Yep.
but it could be an entire world if you're down where the chessboard is. And I just found that so fascinating.
But see, you learned that through that kind of book, right?
Mhm.
And I learned it because I am scared of dolls. And that's because growing up, I just watched horror movies where there was always those clown, what do you call it? not ceramic, porcelain dolls.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, they have to come alive. Then Toy Story came out. Then Annabelle came out. And you're like, see what happens to those dolls when I go to bed? And that's where your imagination can honestly just take over, your mind, and you can create some interesting and probably unnerving situations for a book.
They did a whole franchise with a doll that was killing everybody, Chucky.
Yes.
They did an entire franchise.
Yep.
So, it just lets you know that as a writer,
Yep.
that there is, as I said, there is no ceiling. But
There
let me
isn't.
ask you this.
Okay.
You come from a pretty large family, 6 sisters, 1 brother?
Yep.
Wow. So was everyone in the family a creative, or was it just, you, or was everyone a creative?
No, everyone is a creative.
Mhm.
Everyone has their own thing. My sister, Odessa, owns a clothing store that's really popular here in LA called Nobody Jones. My brother's a painter. You'll see
Mm.
one behind me.
Oh,
And
nice.
then there's some other, all over my house. And then my other sister's like a DIY freak. My other sister makes candles,
Mm.
they're all into, they all have something that brings the creativity out of them, because we all grew up in a very like corporate structure, like adult life, right? We all worked in corporate, but we had to have an outlet that kind of used our creativity to its max.
Okay. So let's talk about the book you wrote. Let's talk about Caitlin. So you entered the contest. You
Yeah.
end up writing, after that, you end up writing Caitlin.
No,
So,
Caitlin was first.
Caitlin was first, and then you entered the contest. That's right, because you said
Yes.
you then created the writers group.
Yeah.
So why did you write Caitlin?
So short stories have always been my thing. Like I love short stories. I can write short stories. I used to do a thing every year. I wrote 30 short stories, and all you had to do on Facebook was send me your name. And then I would write it based on whatever came to me when I saw your name. And
Mm.
I had a great time. I loved it. People would repost it, blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, a friend of mine said, well, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I had written a kind of a premise, I would say a shorter story, maybe like 3 or 4 pages, around Caitlin. And then my sister was like, well, why don't you just try and write the book?
Mm.
And like I said at the before, I'm willing to try anything. It can go well, it can not go well. I just want to get it on paper. And so I did it. But I started in like 2010, maybe.
Mhm.
And picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. Then finally in like 2013, a good friend of no, was it 13? Yeah, the beginning of 2013, a friend of mine who had done like some beta reading for me of it, was like, "Hey, whatever happened to that book?" And I was like, "Oh, it's kind of just sitting on my shelf. I need to pick it back up. I'll do that soon." And she was like, "Don't ask me to read anything ever again if you're not going to finish it." Now, the funny part is same thing happened to my sister. My sister read a story that I wrote that I promise I'm going to pick up one day. And then she was like, "Well, whatever happened to that little girl?" And I was like, "I don't know. I never finished it." And she was
Mm.
like, "Don't ask me for nothing ever
Mm.
again." So I said, I got to finish it. And I finished it in 2014. And I was going to do the whole, like, what do you call it? Query. And I queried a few people. And you're kind of just sitting there and holding, do people want, is this the thing that they're doing right now? Is this the topics? Blah, 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 blah. And Amazon had started Create Space right at the same time. And I said, oh, I could just self-publish it. And then, I'm talking to one of their people online because they had helpers at the time. And she's like, yeah, and it's amazing. People are making great money. And, they're getting to put out their books like constantly, things that they don't want to have to wait. And I was like, I'm doing it. So another girlfriend of mine, she at the time started her graphic design business. She helped me get it formatted. She
Mhm.
did the cover, all of that. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm going to put it out there to the world. And it went out and it did really well at like the book signings and stuff, that because at the time they did these things called virtual book signings.
Mhm.
So you would sign up with a company and then they would read the book and then they would find you all these people to interview you, kind of like this.
Mhm.
They would interview you or they would write an article about it and then they would push the book. And it did really well. And then, you start getting the negative reviews and you kind of go into a shell.
Mhm.
Like I must suck. But I knew I didn't. And it was a goal of mine and it was done. And that was it. Like I really enjoy writing. So I never want to take the joy away from it.
Nice. So
Yeah.
you write that is successful
Yes.
despite the haters, but you know what?
We
You
all
are
got hate.
not successful if you ain't got no haters.
That's right.
You cannot be successful if somebody ain't saying who she thinks she is. She ain't.
I believe
Like,
that.
she wrote that. Here's the one that I love. She wrote that little book.
Yep. Yes. And I just had a conversation this morning around using the word little, because there are some people who genuinely are using the word little to diminish you. And then there's some people who are trying to give it the more, my friend and I were saying, the context of being more intimate. And I was like, and we have to be very conscious of our decisions, the words that we use around it. And so, use around anything, especially nowadays. I don't want to ever diminish some of these things. But yeah, that's how I felt. I did get some stuff like her little book. Miranda's on her little book journey.
Mhm.
Shut your mouth.
Lisa, look, but you know what? As you said earlier, at least you did it.
Yes.
So, and here's the thing that I say to people when I was actually writing and making films, and someone would say, I have a small part or I have a little part. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would always tell them everything is integral to this.
Yep.
That makes it move along. And just as a quick side story, I was a helicopter mechanic when I was in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And they would have very small screws
Mm-hmm.
in the helicopter that had to be there or it did not fly.
See?
And the pilots would do what was called a pre-check, and they would go over everything, much like when you go to the airport and you may see the mechanics out, doing the pre-flight checks
Right.
for the airplane. But they did those pre-flights to make sure that every piece was there,
See?
because if a piece was missing, they would ground the plane. And actually, my wife and I know we're way off track again,
That's
but
okay.
we went, where did we go? We were flying to Punta Cana,
Mm-hmm.
and a circuit breaker on the plane went out and it shut the entire bathroom down.
See?
Plane got grounded. Circuit breaker, ladies and gentlemen. A
Yep.
circuit breaker, if you look at it in the context of a large airplane, is a very small piece,
Yeah.
but it shut the entire thing down. So when people say little, small, you may be trying to diminish it,
Mm-hmm.
but that small or little thing could be the entire linchpin of your script or the film.
Yes. Yep. And the crazy part about it is we really do not think about the larger impact of the
Mhm.
things that we commit to finishing. Right? So me committing to finish my book led to me having this writers group, led to a number of people who were part of my writers group are now writers now, some in television, some have been showrunners, some have like their own production companies. Like a lot of those people are doing magnificent work because they saw, okay, even when it was hard, Miranda still did it.
Right.
Right. And so I didn't fall apart because somebody told me, oh, I don't like your book. What I did was I was like, okay, I don't care. It's out there. What are you going to do? I can't take it back. You know what I mean? So it was like, I, I, I believe in my ability to inspire people. And
Mhm.
so that is why I commit to finishing or to working on things that may seem like they don't matter in the moment, but in reality, they do.
Very, 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 very important and very true. So
Yeah.
you write Caitlin. Caitlin is successful,
Yes.
and that ends up opening some doors for you because you end up writing for Disney. You end up
Mhm.
writing for VH1, Hip Hop Squares, as well as AllBlk. Now, everything that I just kind of laid out sounds very easy,
Yeah.
just, but was it as easy as it sounded?
No, because the first people that I wrote for was Bounce TV
Mm,
with under Bentley Evans, who is the EP for Martin and Jamie Foxx show and a lot of other amazing, beautiful work, right? Even on AllBlk Partners in Rhyme with MC Light. I had reached out to quite a few people, and people were like, oh, well, we don't do, most of the people around me don't do drama or thrillers. And that's really what I wanted to write. I wanted to write procedurals, Law and Order, Criminal Minds, all of those, that's my thing. I love, that's my jam, right? I wanted to
mhm.
wrap up by the end, but there's maybe some story that kind of, is peppered throughout. But my first, go at it in TV was comedy. And that is the hardest thing in the world to write. Like comedy is the most difficult thing to write. I don't care what people say. I'm a naturally funny person, but
Mhm.
you got to make people laugh who aren't around for the long-term joke, right? I got to make somebody laugh in 22 minutes. Not they've been in sitting in my kitchen for 4 hours and now they got the inside jokes and all of that stuff. So it was actually really hard to find somebody who would give me a chance to come in, sit in the room, whatever. And it was a good friend of mine, Ryan. He was like, Miranda, I asked Bentley and you could come and sit in this room for 24 hours. After that, it's up to you. I don't know, like I don't have any more ins. I'm trying to get in myself. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, bet. And I came in and it was amazing. I wrote with them for 2 or 3 years. Well, it's probably 2 years straight in the beginning, working on shows that were already created in The Cut and Family Time, which were great. But they were also developing other shows. I was getting a chance to, you know, like find my voice, whatever
Mhm.
my voice was. And I have a very distinct voice because I'm speaking from a Black woman's point of view, a mixed race person's point of view, a woman's point of view, a girl who, a person that grew up in LA, born and raised, which, there's all these ideas around that. And then, big family. I was raised in LA predominantly by my dad, super proud Black father that is pushing all these ideas as well. So it's like I have all this nuance to bring to the table, and it was fun. It was a lot of fucking fun.
Mm.
Yes, a lot of fun. So it was hard. It was hard though. You came in and you worked and you paid your dues and you're writing with people you don't know and you're creating those relationships and hoping you're building a network of people that are going to talk about you when you're not around. And it's led me to some incredible, incredible jobs that have been fulfilling.
Beautiful. So
Yeah.
let's talk about writers' rooms because you've been in a few,
Yes.
and as per our conversation that we had when we did the Black in Hollywood panel,
Hmm.
you're a staunch advocate for the truthfulness when it comes to our voices. So can you talk about advocating for Black voices when you're in a writer's room?
It's it's hard. I will say that. You really are putting your position on the line when you do it if you're not, well, even in some Black rooms, right? Because
Mhm.
Black people are not a monolith. Like we are very different across the board with each other, but then there are things that we all know, right? We all know, and if you don't know them, it's kind of weird because then you're like, well, where are you from, right? That's the reason why there's so many conversations around Black Americans and then Black people, because to a lot of people that's a different thing, right? um so when you're in a room, you may be fighting somebody who is Black, but they grew up in Indiana in a predominantly white neighborhood, and went to all PWIs,
Mhm.
right? So then they're like, no, I don't remember that. And you're like, well, that's how it went down in my school. And you may be around 6 other people who it did happen to. And then you're just kind of like, oh, great. Okay, I have some backup. We're going to get this in. But then you're around other people who just have this idea of what Black people are, right?
Mhm.
Because it's been pushed for so many years. Black people do this, Black people do that, right? If you watched the recent show The Scare, the season 2, in it, this guy is an actor and he's auditioning for parts in the 90s, and everything was gangster number 1, drug dealer number 2, all of that. And I think that's where they get these ideas that this is how we act. You know what I mean? Black people come home and we're loud. Black people come home and we're this and we're that. And so if you're coming in and you're saying, no, that's not what we would do, right? In Girls Trip, I ended up watching it today because I wanted to see it before it went off of Netflix. And Girls Trip, there's a scene in there where they're all praying, but all the women have on their bonnets or their scarves are tied up or whatever. And in other shows, they would be like, oh, she's going to get in the shower. And I'm like, she's not going to tie her hair up. She's going to go to sleep and just rough up them braids. And who would let their edges? And why didn't anybody ever give that man a fade or a haircut and line him up? All of these things that are important to us.
Mm-hmm.
But they may not be necessarily important to them in portraying Black people as like an in-depth character, right? We're very flat or 2D to them. We're like the best friend trope, or we're the family down the street, or we are the token girl that works with us that's kind of sassy or super sexual, or she knows all the hip lingo and the dances. And you're like, that's not how everybody is. So you do have to pick and choose your battles in the room, whether you're in an all Black room or whether you're in a mixed dynamic room, whatever. You have to decide what that is, because even in an all Black room, they may be like, well, Black women do this. And it's like, no, we don't all do that. Mm-hmm. So you have to fight for it. And some aren't worth fighting for. Some aren't, but some you do, especially if it has your name on it. I don't want you watching a show and it says Miranda Bowden Parker, and then you be like, I know she didn't let that pass. And I'm like, I didn't. I will fight somebody. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to come in and explain who Black people are to the world in those writers' rooms.
Yeah, and actually, my next question, you kind of answered it, but the next question that I have for you regarding this is, have you ever had to protect our voices from us?
Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine those conversations, having that conversation with a Tim Scott type of Black person.
Yeah. Well, I was in a room, and I'm going to give you an example. I was in a room with 2 Black men who grew up in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And the conversation came around, like one of their super close white homeboys say the N-word. And I was like, hell no. So, but my response was immediate, because in my mind, I'm thinking everybody's going to say hell no. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't everybody that said hell no. And some people were willing to let it pass. And it became a very heated argument, because I'm like, regardless of how you feel, it's not going to happen in this show. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and that's one thing I will fight for. And I will go, try to go to the showrunner on the side and be like, we can't do that. We're going to look crazy. You know what I mean? If he doesn't get punched in the mouth for it, like, those are the moments where you're like, oh, okay, so everybody didn't grow up like this. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? No one's saying anything about this girl's wig looking terrible. And no one's telling us that this little girl sassing her mom back that would never pop off. Like I said, There's the things we're going to fight for. And then there's the things that you're not going to tell me this is a Black show and we look crazy.
Yeah, because you know what? With everything that you mentioned,
Mm.
regarding Black people and saying that's not us, even if it is,
Mm-hmm.
that is not them in their entirety.
Right. And that's what I mean by that. Yes.
Because it's interesting when my mom years ago, my mom would talk on the phone to her church friends.
Mm-hmm.
She would sound a certain way.
Yep.
She would get off the phone and go back to the way Annette sounds growing up in North Philadelphia. If you're familiar with North
Yes.
Philadelphia, we in the hood.
Right.
And my sister asked her, Mommy, why do you talk two different ways? Because it's two different situations, it's two
Yeah.
different scenarios.
Yep.
So oftentimes, I've never been in a writer's room, but I'm guessing that when you're talking and you're talking about dialogue, and I've written
Mhm.
scripts, and someone writes something, you're like, yo,
Yep.
that's not how we talk.
Yep.
That's not how we sound.
Yep.
Under no circumstances would that little girl say that to her mother, because she'd have a fistful of, a mouthful of what. Well,
Yes.
no, I don't think she would. Maybe not in your house,
Right.
but in the house that I grew up in, you talk back to your father, there may be a standing A count, because
Right.
he going upside your head, you know.
And that's
So
across the board.
mhm,
Because you even said you're from North Philly.
yes.
Okay. So you think about just the lingo and the slang that you use there, right? The same thing with LA.
Mhm,
There's lingo and slang that we use here. If you're gonna write that on the page and it doesn't sound real to me being from LA,
right.
then, and especially being from Black LA, I'm gonna make sure that you don't sound stupid when we say it. So it's like, let's just be inclusive of the fact that I'm not trying to tell you to not do what feels good for you in your show. I'm trying to make sure that we're presenting the world as a real place.
Mhm,
And that's a thing. Like, they had a thing with Candace Owens on, like, I think the Breakfast Club or whatever. And they said, won't he do it? And she didn't know the response to it.
he said,
Oh,
God
God
is
is good.
good.
And yes, and
Now the
all the
response is
time.
all the time. And she was like, yes, he is. See, the black card that was never given to you has been revoked.
Yes. And
Because if you
also, now we know
Mhm,
how you grew up. And then we can address that accordingly as well, right? Because
mhm,
maybe everybody doesn't know that, but I don't know how, because I mean, there's like 5,000 memes. I mean, even every race should know that
mhm,
by now, but whatever, we're going to leave her to her thing. But that's what I mean by making sure that our stories are represented, not just because I'm saying that this is the way that
mhm.
we act as Black women, as Black people. It's because we can go out there and find examples of the reason why this goes on.
Yeah, it's true, because we were watching church the other day, and the pastor said Jesus is on the main line. Tell him what you want. Now,
Yes.
see, that is an integral part of us as Black folk. And with me being from Philadelphia, one of the words that we use here is join. JAWN.
And
You know,
I told you my issue with John.
yeah, so like, yo, that joint is fire, or that joint is bad, or that joint is cold. Now I just explained a woman, a object, and whatever. But when I've seen shows try to use that word and they butcher it, what that does, in my opinion, is it takes you out of the show.
Yeah. Especially if you have been anywhere near Philly,
Mhm.
if you know people from Philly, if you watched enough shows that include a Philly person, it's just like it's aggravating, and it's like it's nails on a chalkboard. And I think we said that. Oh, I said this on the Black in Hollywood thing. My biggest issue in Creed was when they had Tessa Thompson saying it over and over and over. And I love her as an actress. And I was disappointed that somebody didn't pull her to the side. Like, girl, you don't have to say it that much. You know what I mean? It's like when people come to LA, it's cuz. No, but nobody says it that much. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and it's just, it's a thing. It's a thing.
So how do you navigate that? Because you're in a group. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just you, but you feel very strongly about your position on something.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be getting a lot of pushback on a particular thing,
Mm-hmm.
on a particular way they have this young man or young lady acting. So how do you navigate that, but also keep the peace in the room?
It's hard because if it's something you feel strongly for, you're gonna ruffle feathers if they're
Mhm.
giving you so much pushback, right? It's different if they're giving you pushback and then finally somebody relinquishes your side or their side and then you walk away. But if it's like something you really feel strongly about, you're gonna leave out of that room upset. And usually I would say 9 times out of 10, you go to your showrunner or go to one of the more senior writing staff and you say, you'll be like, okay, most of the time, which is grateful. I've worked with amazing showrunners who at least know how to turn the volume down in the room quickly. They'll be like, okay, this is getting too heated. Let's put a pin in it. Let's come back to it. Let me do some research and then they'll talk to you offline or they'll talk to somebody else because you can tell that if it's this big of a if this discourse is being created, that then there is something to it. Now it's different if you just say, well, she shouldn't be the best friend because it's always the Black girl best friend, right? They're going to be like, well, that's too bad. That's the character we wrote. But if it's something more like, well, why does she have to be the sex crazed Black friend? Why are you always presenting Black women as sex crazed Black friends, right? Then you're fighting for something different. This is this woman's character
Mhm.
at the end of the day. And so then that's when you have to talk about it. I'm sorry, there's things you have to fight for.
Mhm.
There are things you have to fight for. And you might be willing to risk. But that's why you see on a lot of shows, you see a lot of people of color, I'm not going to even just say Black, will walk away if the show is predominantly what that race is and they're being presented in a not so great light.
Mhm. So more oftentimes it's some stereotypes, they are what they are,
Yes.
and we understand that. But I guess if it's a word, over stereotyping, if that's even a word, where it's almost like a caricature
Yeah.
of of a human being.
Yep.
And we do have characters. Every race has characters,
Yes.
and we get that. But again, to what I said earlier, that's not the entirety of the person. And let me ask you this: with the way sometimes Black characters are portrayed, could they even make it to where that person is acting that way because of a trauma that we can explore what we're not exploring, like an overcompensation? Let's say, for instance, if you say, okay, you're not going to take this out,
Yeah.
but let's explore why, the why of
Yeah.
why this person is acting like this. Have you ever had those conversations in the writing room?
Yeah. But they're more few and far between. And it usually ends up happening around dialogue. So,
Mhm.
when we write, like you may write a character and you're using a lot of or cuz or um girlfriend, those kind of things. Then you can be like, okay, that's too much,
Mhm.
right? Because now you are making her just sound like a character. That's why American Fiction was like such a great movie, right? Because you're like, just be Black, the Black that they think. And you're sitting there like, okay, I get what you mean. But other times, I would say the conversation is around like, why does she need to be that way?
Mhm.
And, or why does he need to be that way? And it's because they have some idea of it making the show seem more hip or
Mm.
culturally relevant, or something like that. And you realize like you're using them as a pawn,
Mhm.
right? So there, you can't fight it because they've already cleared it through a notes or through an outline or through a treatment or whatever, and that's what they do.
Hmm. So it's like they're making their character one dimensional.
Hmm. And usually, unless it's very hard for you not to see characters of color as one dimensional if they're not in a show that is their own.
Mhm.
That's the unfortunate part. There really is no real depth or backstory or um, like life behind what they are. Like you may have a show like, I can't even remember the name of this show, but it was like The Drunk Girl or something like that. And it's like, but by the 10th page, you know why she's drunk, you
Mhm.
know her to history, you know her trauma, you know all of that stuff. But then you may see another show and it's just a drunk person. And you're like, well, why are they always drunk? And you never find out why they're
Mhm.
always drunk. They're just a drunk person. And it's like, well, that doesn't make me like the character anymore. That doesn't make me root for the character to be drunk or not be drunk. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I just think that there are times when there's no depth given to um, characters of color.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I shared a video a few days ago. Samuel L. Jackson was talking about when someone writes something
Mm-hmm.
and they may not have even had a black character in mind when they wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's presented to him, he basically said, I don't need you putting words in my mouth
Yeah.
because I'm black. I know how to talk.
Yep.
I can conjugate. I know the vernacular.
Yeah.
And if you give me the creative freedom to do what I know how to do, I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to bring this character to life.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys often find that sometimes writers are very adamant about how the way they want black characters to talk and act and be, and they're like, well, I think this is how it should be, and that's it.
Yes. There are times when that happens. This is what I want you to say. I want you to say what is on the page, even if you know the nuance of it is not correct. The way it's being said is not correct. They don't care. This is the way I wrote it. And so then you go with it. But then there are a lot of great, which this is the other fortunate part. There are a lot of actors who will stand their ground. They'll be like,
Mhm.
I know how to make it sound right. Don't worry about it. And then you're like, oh, okay. But that's why sometimes you read a script and you'll be like, this sounds dumb as hell. But then you see it on the screen and you're like, oh, because they took it and they made it work. But there are some EPs and senior writers that want you to write it, and I'm going to say in English. So you write it out and it's clear vernacular, and then the actor takes it and gives its character and its nuance, right? But then there are some who because they don't really know that world and that industry, you are writing it like that. You are writing it the way that you would think somebody is going to say it, and then you have to fight to make sure on set, you got to fight to make sure that it kind of flows right. You're not just saying like some crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wrote a script years ago, my first and only feature film. And I remember being on set and the cast members standing around. It was a film about, black lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all friends of mine. And the way I wrote, it's like I write it, but you have to bring it to life. So if it doesn't
Yes.
feel right, you have to let me know. So when they were reading the lines, they say, Floyd, they wouldn't say this. They wouldn't talk like
Mhm.
this. So I'm like, all right, well then what would they say and how would
Right.
they talk? And they say, well, in my opinion, he would say this, and the other guy was like, well, yeah. And then they got really animated, and I said, you know what? That sounds a hell of a lot better what I wrote on the page.
Yep.
Rock out with that, because
But you're
again,
open-minded.
yes,
Most writers aren't. Most writers are like music stars and artists. They take their writing to like it's serious. They're willing to fight everybody over it. And that's why, like, one of the biggest pieces of advice in the beginning of my journey was don't be married to anything on the page. But most writers can't do that. I've worked with people that'll be like, no, we can't cut that. No, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. And I'm like, why? We're not ruining we're not ruining what is being delivered. We're just making it better. But some people can't see past that.
Well, you said something really interesting in the beginning about the treatment that you wrote,
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't formatted correctly, but the
Mm-hmm.
story
The story.
was good.
I know how to tell a story.
So why do you think so many writers have a problem with not wanting to get divorced from what they wrote, even if they have people such as yourself saying, hey, but you know what? If you did it this way,
Mm-hmm.
it makes the story better, which in turn makes you look better.
Because when you're a writer, it's like playing in your head.
Mhm.
So you're like, oh no, that sounds great. That sounds great. And then you give it to somebody else. They don't have the same voice in their head.
Right.
They don't even they're not even imagining the same character in their head. But that's hard as an artist to be like, how did you not see what I was talking about? Do you get what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think that's what messes people up, is that you go in, it's like if I said right now, you made up a story about, a garbage disposal that grabs hands, right? And I would be like, oh my God, that's great. Now we need to know, is the garbage disposal possessed or whatever? You may go into this whole long diatribe of the house and why the house is possessed and how, and completely miss giving me why the garbage disposal is the one that's killing people.
Mhm.
Now, when I get it back from you, I may say to you, but Floyd, I still don't know why the garbage disposal. And you'll be like, because the house is on it. But you're not telling me it infected anything that could kill you. Because the refrigerator can't really kill me unless it like snatches me in and put me in there, right? But the garbage disposal is something that could kill me, So, but it's because you missed that one little piece that somebody who's reading it and is very literal, because usually these readers are literal, they're going to be like, no, you missed it. God, this was terrible. And you're like, wait, I could go back and I could tell you that the garbage disposal is pissed off. You know what I mean? But that's what writers do. You have it in your head you have the whole idea in your head. And that's why they say in the middle of the night, when you get the best ideas or in the shower or whatever, and you wake up, then you try to write it down and it does not translate right. And that's
Mhm.
because a movie is playing in your head. The best writers can bring those movies to the page and then let somebody else read it and be like, oh, wait, but I don't understand that part. So then you know what part needs to be added and what could be cut, because the other cut stuff is like fluff.
Mhm.
There
Yeah.
you
Now, you know what? You were sitting here talking about the possessed garbage disposal and why is the garbage disposal mad? And the thing that popped into my head is they say you're not supposed to put chicken bones in the garbage disposal
go. See?
because it jams it. So I'm sitting here saying that the garbage disposal was mad because the owners kept putting chicken bones.
And it's got something stuck in its tooth.
So it's pissed off. So if you stick your hand down there, it's gonna take your damn hand off because it told you not to stick no more damn chicken bones up in this damn garbage disposal, but you did it anyway.
Oh
Oh,
my God.
good grief, good
And
grief.
it's funny because if you really think about that, when you get something stuck in your tooth and you're
Mhm.
going crazy all night until you could get it out, that's the garbage disposal. It got something stuck in the tooth
Mhm.
and it just wants you to get the shit out. And then it's going to unhump the house and the house is back to, being normal. But people don't think like that. Like, I'm sure the first time M. Night Shyamalan told somebody about The Sixth Sense, like, he's not going to see Bruce Willis. And we're like, well, how's he giving them all this? Somebody didn't see it until
Mhm.
that one person saw it, and they were like, "Oh, because the mom never talks to him. It just looks like she is, and then it's this, and it's like now it makes sense."
Mhm.
You think about all those movies that have like some strange, weird twist, and you're like, "Why did somebody take a chance on this? Why?" And it's because you have that one person that you avatar tailed with, and now your idea clicked.
Yeah, and that film was absolutely amazing because I did not get
Mhm.
it until
Till the
Bruce.
end.
Well, if you didn't see it, ladies and gentlemen, spoiler alert: Bruce Willis
Spoiler.
dies at the end. But I didn't see it until Bruce Willis realized that he was dead, and then
Yeah.
when it kind of started flashing back with her sitting at dinner,
Yep.
and other things, I was like, oh snap,
And
he was
that's
never there.
he's been trying to recreate that ever since. But the hard part is we expect it from him now,
Mhm.
right? So now you got to get wild with the other stuff. Like if you watch old, and listen, I'm a huge M. Night Shyamalan fan. Like I don't care what he puts out, I'm gonna watch it just because I want to see if he's ever gonna get me again, right? But you watch old, and then these people are getting old real quick, and you're like, well, why? And what's going on? And then they swim through the thing, and then it's too much exposition to tell me why it happened. And I was like, damn it, I wanted the reveal. I
Mhm.
want the reveal again. And that's the part. People are chasing something they did before too. You know what I mean? They may, or somebody, they told one person it and it hit so hard, and then they're telling somebody else and it doesn't hit hard. And they're like, no, you got to see it. You got to
Mhm.
see it. And they're like, I
Mhm.
don't see it. I don't see the garbage disposal.
Yeah, it's like when addicts tell you, "I'm chasing that first high.
Yes.
I ain't never getting
Yes.
it back, but damn it, I'm gonna keep chasing it because it's like that will o' the wisp. It's right. It's just out of reach. If I can only just and look, I like Shyamalan movies. You know,
Yeah.
I loved the one where everybody was in the elevator with the devil.
Oh,
That
yes.
was a good one. I was like, oh, that joint had me kind of shook. I love
Yeah.
that. But you know what? Yeah, we're almost done. But you know what? That's one thing I forgot to ask you about. We talk about the Friday's Room, and I'm gonna get back to that. Horror.
Yes.
You write horror.
I love horror. I
Where did
love
that come from?
I very young, I was introduced to The Exorcist. Me and my neighbor weren't supposed to be watching a lot of stuff. So we watched Purple Rain. Let me tell you, I'm a Prince fan. That is my love. And we watched The Exorcist. And then we watched Poltergeist. Poltergeist, I still won't watch. Okay. It
I
still
love
messed me up.
Poltergeist.
That man starts singing at the door, talking about let me in. And I'm like, look, Lord, just take me.
Girl, God is in his
Sweet.
holy temple.
God is in.
Boy, that
So I have always loved the idea of being frightened, but
mhm,
know I'm safe, right? So real horror messes me up. I don't really like devil horror. Like I don't like possessions and demons. Like The Exorcist, yeah, of course, because I mean that was when I was young and I'm just sneaking and watching stuff. But I
mhm,
like real life horror. So like I love The Devil's Rejects. I love The Strangers. I love things like that because in my mind, and this is probably something that we had a neighbor, let me say this. We had a neighbor growing up who was a psychologist, and she had all of these books, and they were about your brain, your mind, the way things, the way you can not, I don't want to say manifest because that's the wrong word, but manifest things if you keep like thinking about them, right? So if you keep thinking about getting robbed, eventually you're going to find a way to get robbed in her world, right? And she had this crazy textbook, I don't know what it was, and it was called the dynamics of your mind or the strangeness of your mind, something of that sort. And I read it and I was like, "Oh my god." And it was basically about like you can convince anyone of anything. And then psychological horror became a big deal in the 90s, which was when I was growing up. Silence
Mhm.
of the Lambs. And, you have those things that messed with, you had people messing with your mind. So horror has always just been a thing for me. Like thrillers, horrors, sign me up.
Yeah, and you know what? I love the more psychological horrors and the films that mess with your head. The
Mhm.
visual is like, okay, it's gratuitous.
So you
You
don't like
you
slasher.
chopping them up. I
Yeah,
mean,
you
you
don't like
know,
slasher.
I listened to the interview you, or I don't know if I listened or I read you were talking about the fact that you really didn't like Saw. I just thought
No.
that was, stuff jabbing in your eye, and okay, yeah,
But have you ever seen the 9-minute movie of Saul that got purchased and the reason why they made it?
no.
So now you have to see that because that part is the psychological part.
Oh wow.
And that's why the first Saw was so damn good. That's why
Okay.
Blair Witch Project so good. That's why Paranormal Activity so good because they went for messing with your mind.
Yeah, and you know what? That is oftentimes the best thing because you know what? You can show it to me and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, but if you
Yep.
make me think about it,
If
now
it
I'm
stays with you.
thinking about every crazy scenario that could
Mm-hmm.
take place if you open that door. If
Yep.
I see your hand reaching toward that door and that music is playing, and I'm like, oh Lord, what's on the other side?
Yep.
But if you open it and I see what's on the other side and there's somebody standing there with an axe, okay, you're dead. But if you can get in here,
Mm-hmm.
the person sitting there watching the movie will do the job for you.
Yeah. That's why you think about The Shining, right? Them being up there and they're isolated, and then he starts going crazy and he's thinking he's hearing things and all of these stuff. And it's like, this was all in this man's mind cracked. It's not like he was a killer, he cracked. And so the mental side of that is what messes me up in those kind of horror movies, is because I don't want things to stick with me in my own mind. Like my husband will not watch 90% of the stuff I watch because he's
Mm.
like, how does that not stay with you? Why do you have to watch it right before we go to bed? Like, aren't you thinking about it? And I was like, no, I'm in there peaceful asleep.
Wow.
Like I
See,
was watching a comedy.
that ain't me. If I watch The Shining, I need a couple of days to recover.
Oh
And
yeah.
that is one of the best horror films ever because like you said, his mind cracks and the things that his mind sees. And another movie that I really loved, Event Horizon,
Yes.
same thing.
Yep.
I read this series called Warhammer, and it's basically based on the series science fiction Warhammer of a ship going into what they call the warp.
I gotta check
And
it. Warhammer.
Warhammer, oh, it's
I'm
Warhammer
checking
40,
it out.
girl. Once you
Okay.
go in, you're in it for life. But
Okay.
it's
I
the
like it.
ship, yeah, it's crazy. But the ship basically goes onto what they call the warp. And the
Okay.
warp is basically hell, but
Oh,
it's the hell of your mind because
see,
anything that you think of in the warp manifests in reality.
see.
So if you notice in Event Horizon, everything that was happening in that ship was actually
Mhm.
coming from everybody within the ship.
See? It's all in. That's why horror is such a great genre because you have so many ways to explore it, right? Because even though Nightmare on Elm Street, which is one of my favorite horrors, is a slasher,
Mhm.
you think about the fact that it's messing with somebody's dreams. You don't want people to mess with your dreams. So, like, for instance, I was talking to somebody recently about an idea around sleep paralysis. And I've never experienced it. Well, I hadn't ever experienced it. But we talked about it so much that in my mind, I was almost willing it to happen so that I could experience what she was talking about. And then I would understand even more, about what she was going. And then I did experience it. And I was like, I don't never want to do that again.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I I was like, they're really, that is really the reason why horror is such a genre that that make so much money, because people really do want to take themselves to the brink of what fear feels like in their entire body. Their heart is racing, they're sweating, they're running. How are they going to get away? How are they going to survive? Do they sacrifice their friends so that they could get away? All of these things that you can have in an action movie without a monster.
Yeah.
But it's even better with a monster.
Yep.
And the monster
Yep.
can be literally nothing but your mind.
Hmm.
Like smile, literally nothing but their mind cracking.
Yeah. And oftentimes those are the best ones.
Best ones.
At the end of the movie, you're like, damn, that was all in your head.
That was all in your head.
Which is what movie was with Jennifer Lopez did that years ago when she went in, the gentleman that used to play on Law and Order. And she was some type of dream therapist. Jennifer Lopez was
Oh, I
some
don't
type of,
know. I
oh
gotta go
goodness.
check it out.
Yeah, Jennifer Lopez was a dream therapist, and she ends up having to go into his mind.
Oh no.
Oh, that movie is bonkers.
See, but this is why I love anything to do with cults
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff, because I love to understand mind manipulation.
Hmm.
I love it. I will write about a cult in a minute. And
Oh,
that's what
okay.
Caitlin's about a cult.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm going to definitely have to check that out. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you one last question, and then,
Yes,
well, a couple of questions.
go for it.
The importance of Black stories being told by Black people.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
I just believe that we have so many more stories than the ones that are being told right now. And it's important for us to create them or create the lane for them, because then they do have the nuance of being what Black people can relate to, what we can see. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a gangster movie. It doesn't have to be a drug dealing movie. It doesn't have to be us on the run. It doesn't have to be some. Oh my God. So we were talking about a movie the other day, and I said, did they have a full family? And the guy was like, what are you talking about? I was like, was there a mom, a dad, a sister, and a brother? And he was like, no, well, the dad died in the Navy. And I was like, of course. And I said, oh, it got greenlit, huh? And he was like, yeah, why you say that? And I said, because anything that makes us look broken or less than, right? So like in the movie, the guy, he failed something a couple times, and I was like, so he looked dumb. And he was like, yeah. And then he was like, Miranda, why do you keep saying that? And I was like, because why do we have to play a part of looking less than, right?
Mhm.
And I think about a long time ago, Eddie Murphy did an interview about Boomerang, and he said that they were fighting like, well, no, there wouldn't be a Black guy, who owned a marketing agency and had, the top, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, yes, the hell they would. And I feel like if we don't tell those stories, then people stick with the stereotypical, ideas of what we are. Why, you know what I mean? Like, Johnny Cochran was a real top lawyer in LA. Why aren't there a top lawyer TV show? You know what I mean? Why do we always have to be the lowly beat cop that's walking the streets and gets shot in episode 4? And does he live? And his mom isn't around to take care of him because his sister had a baby and out of wedlock. It's like some damning ass story. And I really feel like if we give more people an opportunity to tell Black stories from their voice, you're going to learn that statistically, a lot of the shit they say about us is not true. And that's the reason why they don't want to give us, it's the reason why the 90s were so huge for Black TV. And you saw us in so many different variations, right? Girlfriends had a lawyer, a poetry girl, a this, or that, and the other, a fashionista, a rich one, everything,
Mhm.
everything. We have to bring it back so that we erase the ideas that have been pumped into the world for the last 10, 20 years about us that aren't true, as in the only truth. So I'm hoping that happens, but I don't know. The state of the business is so weird.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I did an interview last week with a friend of mine, Michael Dennis. He owns Real Black. And he talked about the fact that when he would watch a lot of Black films and shows over the last few years, he would leave with a feeling of incompleteness because it was like, did that serve me at all?
Right.
And interestingly enough, when he said that, it was like a light bulb went off because I was like, why am I so I could care less about watching this? And when he said that, I said, yo, that's it right there. Because I watched this show and it's like, okay, it's more Black trauma.
Yep.
And you know
I
what,
hate
Miranda?
trauma porn.
Oh my gosh.
I will not watch it. I will not.
Yeah. And here's the thing. And I talk about this a lot. And I'm about to let you go. I've been married for 36 years. A lot of my friends have been married for 2 to 3 decades or more. 2-parent households.
Yes.
Our kids all graduated from college. They're doing very well. We make damn good money.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that those people don't exist, but damn it, I don't know them.
Right.
And I'm not trying to sound bougie.
No, you're not.
But I don't know those people. But guess what I do know? I know doctors. I know lawyers. I know professors. I know
somebody
people
wrote
that
a story from your world, it would probably do really well because people can relate.
Right.
We all can't relate to knowing the gangster down the street who sells weed.
Don't know him.
Okay, that's a story. It's been told. It's been overdone. We had a whole show, The Wire. You know what I mean?
And then we had Snowfall.
Snowfall. And I love Snowfall because I grew up in LA in the 80s and 90s. So I get it. That was a part of the world that existed. But it is not the only part of the world. Because if you come and tell a story about the side that I grew up in, West LA, or you go and the side that my friends in Ladera and everything, that's a whole different world. We weren't even allowed to cross La Brea. You know what I mean? So it's like, come on, give us an opportunity to show, I don't know, with all the millions running around and billions running around in our groups as well, we should be able to fund some of this stuff as well. And I know we want to do what makes money, and that makes great sense. But at the same time, we can do like studios do. They make a horror movie to make a shit ton of money, and then they go and put it all into these fine art movies and these independents and these, let's take a chance movies, but it's all based on a horror movie. So you want to do 50 Cent, you want to do Power, but then I need 50 to give me a different one. You know what I mean? Give me a good Black story, like something. I don't know. But I'm not saying it has to be whack. It just has to be interesting. Like I love Greenleaf. It was the first time you ever really got like the nitty-gritty, dirty part of church, which if you grew up in church, you knew that the building fund never reached the building.
Absolutely not.
And I want to know, why does Sister Jones always got to be in the third pew? Who gave her that? Who etched her name in there? So you know what I'm saying? Like there's just so much more to be done. And I don't want to do it because we gave somebody a chance because they changed the lingo and they became ghetto, or we're now a World Star Hip Hop episode. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And
I'm not saying those stories are wrong, because we do need them.
Of
like
course.
I said, we need them, but we also need other things.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a monolithic thing. It's not a one size fits all. As with other cultures, there's so many nuances and differences and everything that makes up the entirety of the culture. And if you just keep hammering that one thing, and you have other people standing around like, that ain't my life.
Right.
That ain't my reality.
Right.
And it's like, you're forcing this reality down my throat.
Yep.
And frankly, I'm kind of tired of it. But enough of that.
Yes.
What's next on the horizon?
You know, a lot of there's a lot of stokes in the fire.
Mhm.
Um, the business is in a weird place. So we'll see. I don't really know what's things are changing daily. Um, I want to write another book, and that's kind of where I'm at now. Um, I've never really been interested in self-help and self-guided therapy type situations, but I have always been interested in like a book like The Alchemist, right? Paul Coelho or whatever. Like I love to see the world um like from a different storytelling point. And so that's something that I've kind of been examining, like how have I lived this 45 years of my life and been able to be resilient, to be strong, to come through the fire in a few in some situations. And what did that, like if I were to tell somebody my story, how would that look? Like would
Mhm.
I how could I tell it in a very almost poetic way? And so I've been kind of studying that. I have like a favorite graphic novel type guy that I love. His name is Victor Laval. Um, and he, it's interesting. He writes comic books and then he writes like crazy ass, like, I don't want to call them horror, but almost like thrillers.
Mhm.
And so I'm just so into the way that he kind of, the juxtaposition of the way that he writes. So I want to kind of play with my voice a little bit. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
I'm on Instagram. That's where I'm at. Like on Instagram, I am Miranda Bowden and I am underscore, no way. Yeah, underscore Miranda Bowden. And then I'm on TikTok, but I don't really do, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram. TikTok is for me because I like the stupid stuff. Like I like learning recipes.
Okay.
I might
Okay.
be on there for a few minutes, but Instagram and Twitter are my thing. I love responding to people. I'm helping, especially young writers or people just who want to talk about taking a chance on themselves is something that's near and dear to my heart. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the writing world. Like I will talk to people about anything that they're exploring and, kind of not use my resources, but point them in whatever direction I can. That's my goal. That is something that I'm working on right now since I've been helping a lot of people.
Okay. Well, it sounds amazing. This has been an absolutely amazing talk. I could have
Thank
actually gone
you.
another hour because I still got a lot of stuff
I
to
know.
ask. So and you
I
got
have to
to
come
come
back.
back.
Yes.
You definitely coming back because we got
Yes.
to talk some more about some books and all of
Yes.
that. I messed my notes up. I was supposed to go in a regimented. I'm like, oh, I'm all, but you know what? This was an amazing
No.
conversation. I love when that happens. This
Yes.
has been absolutely amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you watch this, please listen to it in its entirety because some gems were dropped by the amazing Miranda Bowden Parker. I cannot wait for your episode of Black in Hollywood to come out. I'm gonna have to
Yes.
hit up
I'm
Brandon Myrie
excited.
like, yo, I need to see that.
I
So,
know.
real quick, talk about that. We can't let you go without you talking about the Black in Hollywood segment.
That was such a fun segment to um record. I didn't know what we were walking into, which was even better because that's usually then when I bring like my, like if I know what we're talking about, kind of like today, if you would have gave me the agenda, then in my mind I would have been like, okay, we got to touch on this.
Mhm,
But I didn't know in that same situation. So they were calling me Hurricane Miranda when it was over because I just came in and I was like laughing and talking and
mhm,
just answering questions or we were talking about whatever. And it was such a beautiful experience because as you're coming in and as you're leaving, you're seeing other Black people that you work with, or that you've interacted with. And then you have Carlton Jordan's episode, which I love, and I love him. And I just think, watching his trajectory has been awesome in itself. So for Brandon to bring us all together like that and, have everybody speak from their different nuance and experience and pathways into making it in has been beautiful. It has been beautiful.
mhm.
And I got to actually see people that I grew up in the business with versus it only being like somebody that I'm inspired by or that is coming up behind me. It was like, oh, hey girl, we were at the same networking events. It was great like that.
That's cool. Yeah, I definitely can't wait to see it. And that's actually how I met Brandon.
Oh, okay.
Because I saw Carlton's episode at the Me Show Film Festival.
Yes.
And I sat up front and they did the talk back and I asked some questions. And then afterwards I did impromptu interview
Okay.
with one of Brandon's partners that kind of went viral because I said some choice things.
Oh, shoot.
Because watching Carlton's episode, I was sitting there, I enjoyed it. I
Yes.
really enjoyed it, but I was sitting there pissed off.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what do we have to do?
Yeah.
Like, what do we have to do for y'all to know that we deserve to be here just as much as you do?
Yep.
So I said some interesting things on that interview, and Brandon hit me up like, "Yo, that joint went viral." I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'm like glad it could help." But because you know what, Miranda, I'm going to be truthful.
Yes.
I'm not going to hold my tongue.
No.
And if you don't like it, you have the option of turning it off.
Yep.
So
Hey, the consequences are the consequences, but I'd rather live in my truth than to pretend like something is not something.
yeah, and you said that your integrity,
Yeah,
Eh,
it means a lot.
yeah, because without that and without your word, what do you have?
Right. Right. There's so many more things to cancel me over. It's not going to be my words.
No, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. But ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you so much. If you tuned in or if you'll be tuning in later and watching this on replay, please follow Miranda on Instagram and Twitter and follow her on TikTok as well and
Yes.
watch some recipes.
There you go.
Go pick up the book, Caitlin. Can you spell that so and where can they pick that book up?
It's on Amazon and it's Caitlin.
So make sure you go pick up Caitlin on
Yep.
Amazon. Do that for a sister. And again, thank you guys so much for joining myself and the amazing Miranda Bowden Parker on a conversation with. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you like this show, please share it with your friends because we love bringing you such amazing guests, such as Miss Parker.
Yes.
And this has been amazing. You definitely have to come back.
I will.
And ladies and gentlemen, as always, love it like a hobby, but treat it like a business. And on that note, everyone have an absolutely amazing, amazing night. Peace.